Dear colleagues, my name is Marcella Turner-Cmuchal. I work for the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education, which is project coordinator for the ICT for Information Accessibility in Learning project, which I'd like to tell you a bit about today. I'm very sorry that I cannot be there in person to be able to exchange with you and speak informally face-to-face in beautiful Coimbra, but I hope at least this way you can find out a bit information that I wanted to share with you today if I were there. What is accessible information? Accessible information for us is understood as information provided in formats that allow every user and learner to access content on an equal basis with others, as described in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Accessible information is ideally information that allows all users and learners to easily orient themselves within the content and can be effectively perceived and understood by different perception channels, such as using the eyes and/or the ears or the fingers. Why is accessibility of information important? We believe all educational organizations have a duty to make their information accessible for everyone. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities here is a key driving force for change in the area. Just to give a few examples, the Convention emphasizes the obligation to provide accessible information to persons with disabilities in Article 4. The need for the design, development, production and distribution of accessible ICT in Article 9, and the right to education without discrimination and on the basis of equal opportunity for persons with disabilities in Article 24. As mentioned, we believe everyone or every organization or institution which provides information for education must consider these issues in differing ways within their work. The ability to access relevant information for and about education is a crucial prerequisite for learning. When learners have restricted access to information, they have restricted access to learning opportunities. And this barrier requires active solutions on the part of all stakeholders of lifelong learning to remove these restrictions. We believe that fostering accessibility is our obligation, and we should all work towards becoming models of accessibility. What are the guidelines for accessible information? Well, the guidelines are actually an open educational resource. They aim to support the creation of accessible information in general and for learning in particular, because we believe the steps to achieve accessible information is independent of the content. The guidelines, they summarize and they link to existing and useful resources, which can be helpful for non-ICT experts, such as I believe ourselves. And the guidelines are available in different formats as well. They're available as a text document, as a PDF, and most importantly, as an HTML, which is the basis for it being an open educational resource. What do we aim to achieve with the guidelines? Well, the guidelines were built to support the work of practitioners and organizations working in the field of education, to provide accessible information to all learners who require and will benefit from more accessible information. So these practitioners and organizations in the field includes, but of course is not limited to, information providers such as school staff and university staff, librarians, communication officers, publishers, support groups and non-governmental organizations. So the guidelines aim to support all individuals or organizations wishing to create information that is accessible. in different formats. So what is the scope? In which framework are we considering the guidelines? Well, we have general steps to achieve accessible information, and we believe those are universal. Therefore, the guidelines apply to information in general, to any type of information, but of course as well to information for learning in particular. The guidelines aim to be content and context-free, but they offer some concrete examples of how they can be applied to different situations. Nevertheless, we believe that the use of assistive devices is not made redundant by the provision of accessible information. More so, we would say that accessible information complements the use of assistive devices. How can the guidelines be used? The guidelines build on 2 steps for action. Step 1 describes how to create accessible information bits, I would almost say, so creating accessible text and images and audio and video files or different types of formats. And step 2 considers how media can be accessible, so media that includes text, images, audio and video. For example, in step 2, we'd have examples of electronic documents or online resources or even printed material. These 2 steps, they build upon each other. By following the guidelines in step 1 to make different types of information accessible, step 2 becomes easier as you're already working with accessible information. For each of these steps, the guidelines provide recommendations on how different types of information can be made accessible. We also have a list of resources available to support this process. However, there is an abundance of resources which aim to help make information more accessible. So we've tried to categorize it into different levels. We have easy actions, which can be completed with really a general knowledge of common software programs such as Office programs. We have advanced actions, which can be easily completed if you have a more detailed knowledge of the different functions of software and programs. And then we have professional levels, which are actions which can be completed with really a more professional knowledge of software in general, and sometimes a knowledge of programming. I'd like to actually just show you really briefly the actual website. I just briefly would like to show you what's available on the project website. Of course, you will find the guidelines quite prominent, but we also have information, if you're interested, on the project in general, the partners, events we've just had, such as the international conference, which was held as an event of the Latvian presidency of the EU. And in this area, you will actually find also all of the presentations of the participants and the speakers, and these are all freely available for you if you are interested in what we've done there. Nevertheless, I would like to focus more on the actual guidelines. On the home page, right in the beginning, you will find what I've described as step 1, making different types of information accessible. So text, images, audios, and videos. You will also find information on making electronic documents, web sources, or even printed material more accessible. For an example, I would like to show you just the text accessibility. Here you will find general information on making text accessible, as well as finding more detailed recommendations of different steps you can take to check and also to make your information more accessible. In addition, we've collected some resources. As I said, we've divided them in easy advanced and professional instructions. Now, if, for example, you think you have some resources which are also really useful and maybe should be added to this open educational resource, we invite you really to register. Once you've registered and added your username, your email address, and maybe what your concern is with accessibility, then you can create a new account. Once you've done that, you can easily log in. I'll do this just to show that it works really quickly. And then under subject and comment, please add your resource or add any other information that you think would be useful for other people using the guidelines. And then once you save them, we will receive an information and then we will publish this for you. So this is just briefly a bit the website. You can also browse through, making images accessible, and browse through the different types of information. So at this point, I'd really like to ask you from afar to get involved. We hope that the open educational resource, the Guidelines for Accessible Information, is a living resource. So we invite you to register to the website, add comments on the guidelines, add information or resources that you think are useful, and please also, if you don't want to add them directly to the website, feel free to share resources and even experiences of using the guidelines with us via email. We'd be happy to hear about what you find useful and maybe also what you don't think is so useful, so things can be adapted in the future. Within the project, the finishing of the guidelines doesn't mean the end of the project work for us. We will continue to work on the project. We will translate the guidelines in up to 23 European languages, as well as Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. So the guidelines will be also available in Portuguese. We will be publishing a report on the implementation process of the guidelines within the agency and our partners European SchoolNet and the International Association of Universities, to give you a bit of an insight of what it actually means if an organization applies the guidelines. Then we continue to share the guidelines as an open educational resource and to, of course, further disseminate the guidelines. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found this presentation interesting. I hope you find the guidelines useful, and maybe you can try them out and let us know if you find them useful. Again, apologies for not being there in person. I would have really liked to be there with you to be able to exchange in person. If you have any questions, please contact me via email, and then I wish you a successful continuation of the conference. Thank you. Goodbye.